Hello and good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Jason's Take On. Today, we are talking about being customer-centric in 2021 and beyond. My name is Jason Whitehead, based here in Washington, D.C. I'm one of the co-hosts here, along with my other host. Jason, I'm going to go and say hello.
I do. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jason Noble, based over here in London, in the UK.
Awesome. Well, we're excited to have you back for this episode. And as always, you can check out our website, thejasonstakeon.com, or we have the Jason's Take On company page on LinkedIn. So please just give us a quick follow. And we'd love to hear what's of interest to you and any topics that you have. And as always, we also love to have great guests. So if you know of anyone who would be a great guest, or if you would like to join us, please come ahead and just contact us. We'd love to reach out and have a conversation with you. So to get started today, as we always like to start with a bold challenge question. And this week, we really want to challenge people around is think about what are the 3 specific things that you can do to help your organization be more customer-centric. So hopefully this conversation will give you a few ideas, and then we'll come back to that at the end. So Jason, to kick us off, what do we actually mean about when we say let's be more customer-centric? What does that look like to you?
I think it's such a great question, Jason. I think I've always said you'd never get an organization that would say they're not customer-centric.
Right.
But I think there's absolutely been a shift over recent years to be more customer-centric. And something I've always said about all the roles I've done with the companies I've worked for and help is I'm there to help organizations be more customer-centric.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, one of the critical things about being customer-centric is being able to respond to changes at your customer. And I think that's really important. And it's something that quite often is overlooked. It's not providing customer satisfaction. It's not making happy customers. Yes, we have to deliver outcomes, but our customers are going through, particularly today, almost continuous changes.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got to keep up with those changes and respond to those changes and keep delivering value while your customers are going through those changes. And I think that's super, super critical. And I think one of the reasons why being customer-centric is so important is not only the obvious, that your customers stay loyal when they have good experiences and when the product's delivering on promises, but also as our customers keep evolving and changing, so too are the ways that we operationalize that and then we support our customers. And I think that's really the key thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you are customer-centric, it means that you are observing and paying attention to that evolution that's happening in your customer base. And you're able to be very agile in how you respond to that. Now for me, there are really, the statement I say about being customer-centric, and I think there's a reason for this, but for me, it all boils down to a business is customer-centric when it delivers ongoing and growing value to and for their customers. And I really like that statement because it includes a reference to something not just for the short term and for the now. So it's about ongoing, growing value. It refers to what it is, the value, and it refers to who it's for, which is for our customers. And it also allows the term customers to include customers as we know them, but also, and we've said this before in the world of customer success, that we're also thinking about our employees, our team members, and also our shareholders, our investors. So for me, those are the really key things. It's being able to change as your customer's changing, but also delivering ongoing and growing value, because that's what keeps our customers coming back to us for more. I don't know if you'd had any other thoughts on that, Jace.
Yeah, I mean, I like what you say there, and I think that's so true about as well expanding beyond just customers to include employees and shareholders, investors, and all those. I think for me, when someone's customer-centric or an organization, it means they truly boldly embody the idea that it doesn't matter how great you believe your product or service to be, if your customer's not achieving and perceiving value, to them, then your business is going to fail, whether it's fail in the short term or fail in the long term. Really having them that mindset and behaviors to manage that your success is dependent on your customer success. And I think a lot of organizations historically, or hey, we've got a great product and the product can compete on features and functions, and customers will figure out the value on themselves. And I think that's putting the cart before the horse. And then I think to be truly customer-centric, it's recognizing and structuring your business to focus on that customer listening and leading. And I think this is important too, because you need to avoid the temptation where you're just really looking just at your internal capabilities or looking there first. And instead, you really need to focus on what is your customer, what do they need now? And that's a listening piece. And what are they telling you? And there's great voice of the customer and there's all these other things, but really, are you truly listening to what they need and taking action with that input? And then I think there's also the other piece where to be customer centric, you also have a role to anticipate what their needs will be in the future, even if they can't see them. And that's a leading piece. Like, how do you identify what's the functionality or the capabilities that your customers will need next, a year from now, 3 years from now?
I really like that one. It is that anticipation as they change and grow. What do we need to do? So it's that helping your customers understand where they're going.
Yeah, and I think that's where you get to be a leader in your industry and in your segment too, is if you spend a certain amount of time meeting immediate needs and a certain amount going forward. And then I think truly, once you have that, and that's got to be that starting point, is where's the market going? What are our customer needs? Everything else, then saying, how are we going to get them there? And that's when you start to look internally. And that's when you start to adjust your business to be agile. Look at your structure, your process, your behaviors of your internal staff. Look at the behaviors of your leadership. And based on this evolution of customer wants, needs, and their capacity, that's where you need to then make your internal changes. But don't start with just, we're going to make the best widget or best feature in our product and push this out. You've got to really look at that whole customer thing.
I think these are some really cool points there. And I too often people just think being customer centric is about having happy customers. And I think this kind of expands it, that it's a lot more, I don't like to use the word, but a lot more complex, but there's a lot more to it than just having happy, loyal customers. And it's really important to understand that. I think if we look back at 2020, I think has been probably one of the most difficult years that we've had in terms of changing customers' experiences, what their expectations are. But what would you say in 2020? What did it teach us about the need to be customer centric, given that we saw a global pandemic during that year?
I think more and more organizations, at least the ones that have really thrived, have realized that a lot of what we've done historically in the past with a lot of organizations, there's a lot of resting on their laurels and putting up with a lot of waste and nonsense because it was historic momentum, I would say. And I think for me, a lot of organizations are realizing if they have this whole mentality of if you build it, they will come, that just doesn't work anymore. And now customers needs to constantly both achieve and perceive the value from it. We talk about loyalty, and I think loyalty is great as long as the market is stable. But if your customer is suddenly looking at cutting 50%, 75% of their organization, everything's on the table. And loyalty goes out the window in the middle of a crisis like that. It's coming down Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You're no longer up where you were, that you can let a lot of things slide. So really, you're now in a situation, I think you'll understand this, that you're constantly competing for that perceived value from your customers, but not just against other vendors in your space, but against every other vendor in which your customer is spending money. You are constantly fighting for your customer's wallet share. And if they've suddenly hit hard and unexpected times and they have to make aggressive changes, everything's going to be there. And the harsh cuts, they're going to focus on what they need now and what is truly critical, not what's important or nice to have. And I think coming from that too, I think 2020 has taught us relationships alone won't keep you there. They may get you in the door, they may get you started, and when things are good, a relationship goes a long way. But if you're not delivering value and helping your customers constantly see how important you are to them, the relationship can do just so much. So I think that's a big thing. And then I guess the final piece for me, 2020 has taught us you need that right blend of short-term and long-term mindset. And many organizations in 2020 learned in the short term, we've got to do anything to either keep our customers, whether that's we don't charge them for 3 months, but then they come back to us in some form or fashion, or we make some other tweaks to their contract. We have to be a little bit flexible with them to then say, what can we actually do in the short term to help reduce their costs in the hope of buying some of that long-term goodwill or long-term loyalty, that when things improve, they're going to remember us as the vendor that really tried to support them, even if we lose them in the short term. So it's a tough balance. And I think, there's probably a lot more lessons on it. What do you think? What else has 2020 taught us?
I think it's been such a difficult year. And I think you've really hit on some key things there. And I think one thing that it has taught us, it isn't just about sales. I think at the beginning of the pandemic, we sadly saw a lot of customer success teams become casualties of restructures.
Yeah.
But it almost seemed to fly in the face of logic. And you're thinking, well, actually, what people want to do is retain and grow their customers, or even just retain customers and not worry so much about new business. Because all of these organizations are not going to be looking at new technology, new services. They'll be looking at how do we maintain status quo? How do we just keep our feet above the water? And I think that's really important, that we saw over the 12 months last year, we really did see a focus to shifting from sales being that we need more and more sales to actually we need to focus on customer success. And there was a big I think towards the back end of the last year, Q3 and Q4, we did see an upturn in investment being made in customer success, which was really exciting to see.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I think, like you say, it is that blend between short-term, long-term, and even mid-term. And it isn't what do customers want immediately, given that they're in the middle of a pandemic, how can we help them, versus what do they want long-term. A couple of other things that I come to mind for me. One, it is a global pandemic. We're in a current situation, we're still in it. We're in lockdown number 3 here in the UK, but we have fast changing circumstances that are affecting pretty much every single company out there, some very differently to others. They're affecting individuals. So all of us personally are either in lockdown situations. We may have kind of family with health problems ourselves we've got to look at, but also our customers are being impacted. So this has never happened before, where you've seen the same external event impact everyone. So I think we've got to be very receptive of external events and what's needed for them. So that, again, ability to change and be agile. Right. And I think, related to that is you've got to be able to expect the unexpected. We've always talked about these things before, look at risk management, but where has a global pandemic fitted into that? And how will that change things going forward? I think if you look at the number of organizations I know, I'm talking about leading global enterprises that have been struggling with the likes of digital transformation, even people going remote for years, suddenly they did it in a couple of weeks when they had to do it. And it's that level of change that we've seen, an unprecedented level of change has been accelerated. And I think that will continue. Right. I think you've also got to find, you talked about this, but you've got to find the right level and right method of customer engagement. We've lost the face-to-face, going to see our customers, going to see your suppliers, your partners. That's just not there now. So video conferencing, Zoom and Teams are absolutely have an impact, but it isn't just about that. It doesn't work for everybody. And I think one thing that I've seen a lot more of is more phone calls. And really, I don't think you can underestimate the value of picking up the phone and having a conversation with somebody. And I think you do get more out of that than a video conference. And I think we're going to see more and more of that trend continuing.
I think you're so right there about changing customer engagement. And I think one of the things 2020 has taught us is the need to quickly recognize that we can't just do what we know how to do anymore. We can't just try and figure out how we do more one to many and do the same. No, let's tweak our messaging. Let's do this. Let's do that. But really get creative about how we're going to help our customers achieve value. And to your point, how they're going to how we help them help their customers. As way of the new service success chain, it's really looking at, you can't just look one leg down. You've got to look all the way across that chain. And I think when I look at some of the restaurants, how they've had to pivot to try and figure out how are we going to do outdoor dining? How will we stay afloat? How will we reconfigure when we're capacity limited to only have half or a third of as much of our client base as we used to have? What else can we do? And when this first came out, there were also like micro distilleries over here in the US that were suddenly making hand sanitizer because they could tweak out some of the ingredients and they could come up with a new product line when there was a huge gap in the market. And now things have caught up. So I think part of this is going to also be, as part of customer centricity, how do you find new ways of doing things you've never thought of before and find creative people to find new solutions? And come with that comes the willingness to take a risk and the willingness to try something new, knowing it may not work.
Yep.
And I think that's going to be really key going forward, is you can't just try and do the same things faster or more efficiently.
Yep.
I think. So I guess to that end, very similar, what no longer works that we used to do in the past?
I think that, again, another great question. There are some things here that perhaps we wouldn't have even a year ago, we'd have never even thought about these things. But I think, as I said in the previous question there, that we cannot rely on having face-to-face dedicated time meeting people. I think that's just going to change. More and more organizations are doing remote working. I think in the future, what we are going to see is a less business travel. 2020 has demonstrated that we can survive, we can thrive, we can grow without business travel. So I think you're going to see a change in how this works, and the need for people to actually sit in the same room. It'll still be there, but I think it'll be there to a much less of an extent. And I think that's something that's going to be very important to see how that develops. I think we've also making too many broad segment level assumptions, I think, is key. We've seen this COVID has impacted every single organization. It doesn't care about segments. It doesn't care about kind of geographical locations to an extent. But I think you've got to get away from making very broad assumptions at a segment level. And even if you look at segmentation based on experience, segmentation based on what expectations people want, that's changed. This has affected everybody much beyond however we thought the segments will work. So that's something I think people have to revisit segmentation and perhaps be prepared to dive in at even a more granular level. We might see a breaking down of certain segments into kind of micro segments, which is going to be difficult to do. We're going to have to look at tools and services that allow us to provide that level of efficiency around that. I think another key one for me is historically we've been able to not necessarily use the right tools, and we've been successful without having the right customer success management tools in place, the right CRM in place, the right collaboration technologies in place. But we've seen now that there is absolutely a place and a need for this. And I think automation has become even more critical. That personalization, being able to do everything at scale though, but making it personalized is really important. So I think not having the right tools might have worked historically, we might have got by on it, but I think now, irrespective of how quickly we're trying to scale and grow, you cannot succeed without having the right tools and technology in place. When you look at efficiencies, you look at driving value, you look at automation, these things are absolutely super critical for us.
Yeah.
Anything else you'd add on that?
Yeah, and I like what you're saying about having the right tools and technology. And I think with that also comes the growing recognition that it's not just having the tools in place, but getting people to use them as intended, as designed, and collaborating with the tools in a way that creates the value that you want. And for so long, I think that's the whole reason we have customer success, is so many organizations could deploy a technology, but struggle to get everyone to use it in a collaborative way that delivers ongoing value. And that's where part of the challenge is. But one of the things that you said earlier that really struck me too is like the need for looking at how well you as an organization can drive digital transformation. And what I start to look at here too, and we think of practices that no longer work. And overall, I would put it in a big bucket of, for too long, a lot of organizations would tolerate and put up with bloat in their organization. And that bloat could have been staff members who may be in the wrong role or not really productive or just not happy there anymore, but they stay on longer than they should. Some of that bloat could be things where there's a perception, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And there was a perception we're still closing some sales, we're still doing whatever we needed to do, that we can put up with some bad practices internally. And now I think people are recognizing that a lot of poor behaviors before that they could get away with because they were still winning sales and still doing some things no longer fly down, and they lose customers if they don't have them. So really making some of those hard internal changes to align your organization to keep everyone customer centric and make sure everyone's really delivering value. People are going to start saying internally, like, hey, are we really doing enough here? And I think for a long time, organizations weren't. And sort of on that theme too, having worked with a lot of sales, service, and marketing groups in the past, most organizations, they would tolerate a certain amount of lone wolves or the cowboys from the sales perspective, because they were closing deals and bringing in money, regardless of the impact on, were they bringing the right people? Were we able to service them effectively? Could we actually retain them and deliver the experience? And I think now people are looking a lot more like how well are internal staff collaborating to deliver value, and that you can't have a great individual performer if the way that they're operating prevents everyone else downstream from delivering the experience and that great impact and value to the customer. So I think there's going to be a lot more looking at the internal change management and internal leadership to make sure that you're delivering on the customer vision. And even just from the basics, but I think people are realizing through Zoom work and other things that you can waste a lot of time in meetings that it's not productive, and that you don't need to physically be there to micromanage your employees, because that doesn't help either. And people are going to really start to look at what are some of these leadership and management skills about how we keep employees productive and how we keep collaborating with them. So
I think that's a really interesting point about wasting time in meetings, because I think you wouldn't want a Zoom, a video meeting without kind of the pleasantries of it, but it's understanding how much you need. You do like the introductions, you like to say hello, but it's understanding what that balance is.
Right.
And I think what you can probably see is that online video meetings can be more productive and more efficient. But there are some very unique things. The number of times that people wave goodbye to each other in online meetings is amusing to see. You'd never do it in a real meeting room. And I know there's lots of
right.
kind of parody videos done about it. So I think that is something that is going to be really interesting to see how that works. How would you say over the last 12 months or so, how have customer expectations changed? What changes have we seen?
I think one, both with customers, but even internal in organizations too, is a lot more humanizing and giving people grace and legitimate concern for how are you as an individual holding up and faring physically, mentally, socially within your family, whether or with isolation or what's going on. That people are starting to recognize the importance of it doesn't matter if you're a vendor or someone else, we're all human first. And that's, I think, one of the positive things. And I think related to that too is to a certain degree, customers will give a little bit more grace and understanding up to a point. And they're understanding that people are more stressed than ever, facing challenging circumstances, whether it's you have young children at home and you're trying to work a full-time job while caring for those, or if you have sick relatives or whatever it may be. So I think people are being a little bit more understanding that everything just takes a little bit longer than it used to, and they're willing to go with that. And I think though customers do expect you will be able to deliver some version of an experience virtually. And especially when March, April, when things first started to kick off, I think there was a lot of up in the air. No one knows what's going on. But now here we are 9 months later, whatever it may be. Like, all right, you should have figured this out in some version by now. And you need to figure that out. And I think customers expect you to change quickly. And people are getting back to the point, Amazon can deliver this pretty quickly. You've had almost a year. What's the holdup here? Or my other vendors are doing this. So I think expectations are quickly going there. People are being a little bit more human, but they're getting back to the expectations of we're paying money. This is a service. We expect the value that we want. And I think part of that too is they're looking very closely at service delivery and your ability to make their lives easier and make their lives more effective in their work jobs is key. And they're recognizing, especially from a customer success perspective, a lot of different vendors bring many different things to the customer success party. Not all of them are great. Not all of them are adding the value that as a customer they may need as an individual. So they're taking a really close look at, what is this holistic experience, product plus service plus customer success, and are they getting what they need? And I think ultimately they're going to take that careful look at what is the value, what's the experience, are we saving time and effort, are you making my jobs easier or harder, and am I getting the value we want? So I think those are some areas where expectations have changed. But what about you? What are your thoughts?
I think that one there is really key because I'm quite frankly getting a bit fed up of organizations where you phone up now, but it is 9 months on. Due to COVID, the situation, we're not able to get to your call quickly. Too many organizations are using that as an excuse. Mm-hmm. They've had ample time to gear up for this new normal, make changes. And it's really disappointing that organizations are still doing that. And I think that's something that you've got to be responsive to these changes. We have different expectations now, and we don't want to rely on the same things that worked before. And I think that's really key. I think one of the key things is the expectations are still changing. People, it's almost counter to what I just said, but individuals are still not quite sure what they want. We can't now go out in the UK, for example. There's a bigger reliance on online, but because they're still changing, you've got to be very agile and be able to change, as we said before. And I think it's still changing across both me as an individual consumer, but also as companies, it's changing.
Yeah,
I think one of the other key things is that remote work is a very real thing now, and how we interact with each other has changed. Mm-hmm. That is something that is so important, and relationships are important, and they really have become critical. And that understanding, particularly, we were saying earlier on, there's a lot of people that are on their own. And they don't have that day-to-day FaceTime with other people. And it's important to understand that. So I think you've got to be very conscious of individuals. You've got to be very conscious of how their own circumstances are and how that might impact you as well. And you as a provider delivering services to them. Yeah,
and I think too, and this sort of leads into the next question, a lot of people have become more comfortable with a variety of different technology interactions for engagement. But it doesn't have to be a phone call. To your point, it doesn't have to be face-to-face meetings. I think a lot of people, they miss social interaction. They don't say miss work travel and work meetings per se. But I think people are different tools and technology. Like I don't need an instant access, or I don't need to be on the phone with someone if I can chat with them and do three other things at the same time. And I guess to that end, Jason, let me ask you, what new tools or technology, or even just techniques do we have now that will change how we engage customers going forward? What do you think is going to really stick here and make things better as we hopefully come out of this pandemic fairly soon.
I think one of the big ones is it has to be video conferencing. And that when I say conferencing, I don't just mean one-to-one calls. We can do one-to-many calls. You can now break out into separate meetings. You can do polls. You're seeing a real growth in virtual events popping up, which is really well. That's been done using similar kind of conferencing tools as well. And I think that's something that there probably isn't a person now that doesn't know what Zoom is. I go back 2 years and that was brand new. And I think what we're going to look is a lot of these tools are going to change and we're going to be allowed to collaborate. Things like Microsoft Teams, the whole G Suite products from Google, the ability to collaborate on documents, on presentations, on things at the same time is critical. Now, clearly one of the big challenges we're going to run into is compatibility between these. There are some organizations that are, because of different IT policies, have to use one version versus another. So we're going to have to look at that kind of interoperability between different tools and services. And I think that's something we're going to have to be very conscious of. I think something for me that we're going to have to really look at closely is workflow tools and making sure that we've got the right level of workflow automation, process documentation, understanding how things go from step A to step B to step C, and how that goes from kind of raw product to delivering something from a customer. So that kind of visualization of your workflow is going to be really important. And then I think, as we said already, the other kind of tools, techniques, and technology is remote working.
Right.
People are going to be based at home, if not all of the time, for a portion of the time. And I think that's going to be something that is really going to hit how we work in the future. I really don't see a day where everybody goes back into the office full time. I live on the outskirts of London. All my working life I've commuted into London. I'm lucky enough to have worked for numerous companies where remote working has been a key part of what we do. I'm now working for an organization where we are just remote, but people are going to question the need to spend kind of an hour plus 2 times a day commuting. You don't want to do it. So remote working and how I can get access to all the tools I need through a web browser is really important. And I think that's something that we're going to see a lot of organizations push. If you look at the likes of Salesforce, ServiceNow, Gainsight, these are all tools that work fully through your web browser. So we're going to see a bigger prominence of those coming. I think there's going to be a lot of challenges that IT departments have as to how you manage these. So I think they're a couple of the ones that I'd have.
Yeah, and I like what you're saying about the video conferencing too. And I think taking that another step forward, I'm seeing an increase in almost using video and audio to do asynchronous relationship building. And by that, I send that 1-minute dub video or something to one customer or to 5 customers. And sometimes you personalize them, sometimes you don't. But letting your customers see your face, hear your voice before they get on a call with you puts them a little bit more at ease. They know what to expect. Making sure that people are looking at your LinkedIn profile to understand sort of your background and experience that you're coming. What are you bringing to the party? And I'm sure you've seen this, Jason, where you'll meet someone new or they'll reach out to you, jump on a networking call or a business call, like, oh, I heard the Jasons. I really like what you said here. They feel a little bit more at ease because they've heard our voice. They know what we talk about. And it just makes it a little bit easier. So relationships don't have to be built in real time like that. I think more and more organizations are going to look to that. And then I think there's also changes in technique. And to that point, we're using micro engagement too, the very short video clip just in time, whether it's just in time onboarding videos, whether it's other things like that. I think that's going to go a long way to say, what can we give people in small doses that they can take and consume in a 5-minute interval or a 10-minute interval max between other things so that they can check off their plate or just get a little bit more comfort here. And I think that's going to make a big difference. From an organizational perspective and a customer success, we've talked about this for a while, but more and more as we're training teams and we're working with different teams, they're still skipping over some of the critical pieces early in the relationship of helping your customer to truly define what is success and what's it look like in the short term and in the long term. And then also helping your customer map out what are the steps that they and you need to take to achieve success together, the mutual success piece. And for so long, it's been, here's the technology, here's how you navigate the system, here's what you need to do. But they're not talking around some of the change management aspects and the adoption aspects that are absolutely critical. And more customers or CS folks are realizing our customers don't know how to do this on their own. They don't have that capacity. We need to guide them through these conversations because otherwise they're just not going to get there. And we've seen it historically where they haven't on their own. Let's change about that. And related to that as well too, increasingly, as you talk about the reliance on technology, especially collaboration tools and things like that, having a great collaboration tool, and as you've seen the teams and other things, many of them have so much flexibility that you need to actually have discussions and make agreements of, okay, how are we going to use the tool to make sure we both know, well, where stuff's going to be, how it's going to be labeled, when we find it, who's included in it. It's just a basic collaboration process that people should have been defining all along, but often was skipped. They're like, oh, we'll just find it in the tool, and then they look and it's in the wrong place, or it's named the wrong thing and they can't find it. And that's actually something that we teach in some of our training classes, is our go slow to go fast approach, which is invest a little bit of time from a technique perspective. How are we going to collaborate? How are we going to work together to make sure you get the outcomes that you want, and to make sure that you have the experience that you want, and get those agreements right up front, because otherwise you're always behind the eight ball.
I think that's some really key things there. And I think it has last year's just been so different for a lot of people, and not what their plans were, expectations were. And it's required people to think very differently about this.
Mm-hmm.
I think, let me ask the last question to you, Jace. What do you think we're going to need to do differently as we move forward? And where do we start, and what's the biggest priority? We've talked about a lot of things have changed, but how do we start things off?
I think one of the big things is looking beyond the technology. And by that, I typically mean your technology, your product or service, but it could mean some of the collaboration tools, to really look at the people and the process issues, and how you work internally, as well as how you work with your customers and help them engage with their customers. So focusing on change management and adoption, and what is the critical path to success for our customers? What is the critical path to success for us? And then really looking at all these organizational factors that we need to address to get there. So I think that's going to be absolutely critical. And then the next thing, I think, is building your customers' capacity to drive their success on their own. And that's something that's been skipped for a long time, sort of that teach a man to fish approach. If you've got, I've seen so many times where customer success professionals will go into their customers and say, hey, you've got to drive adoption. Hey, you've got to try change management. And the customer go, okay. And they're like, and how are you going to do that? I don't know. I've never done it. Yeah. Okay. Clearly there's an issue here. And as I think of it, if you almost someone has a severe addiction issue, you want to give them a just say no to drugs commercial, or you want to give them a program with leaders that teach them techniques to actually solve their issues and be able to put behaviors in place that are going to address those. And I think in many ways that a lot of people are addicted to their own current work practices and work behaviors, and you need to help them break that addiction to learn new ones that are going to be more effective for them. And you can't do that just by saying, hey, you got to do this. You got to get into the weeds a little bit. And then I think the next piece too, in terms of how to do this going forward, is get your internal house together. Really make sure that you've got that internal alignment, that you've been addressing those internal behaviors that have been maybe tolerated for a bit too long, and really make sure people are focused on customer centricity, helping make sure everything contributes to the customer's outcomes and success, whether you're sales, marketing, product, all the way through, and figuring out what that looks like, and increasing your ability to quickly adapt and evolve. So quite a bit there I threw at you, but I think there's a lot of it, and the issues are not the technology itself, it's all the other stuff around it for me. But what about for you? What do you think needs to be done differently?
I think, I mean, you've covered some really key points there. And for me, the only kind of other things that I'd add on to it is I think it's going to be even more critical than it has been to date to get a better and deeper understanding of what our customers want, what are the actual outcomes they're looking for, and how do they want those outcomes, so the right level of experience for them. And that I think we're going to have to really dig even deeper to try and find with our customers, and be conscious that those outcomes could shift over time. So you need to keep those conversations going. I think something else that we can't overlook is the need for a level of really improved engagement internally. We've got to make sure that those internal silos don't exist, and we've got to be working. Right. If you look at how your sales team work with product, how your sales team work with customer success, how customer success work with product, those interfaces and links really have to be 110%, because if things aren't working for our customers, we need to know, we need to be able to shift and make the right changes for our customers. So those, I think, are really the key things for me, and none of them are easy to do. I think a lot of these are going to require time to do this, but I think with the right level of investment, the right level of experience, and the right people in place, organizations can really start making these changes. And I'm always an optimist. I'm an eternal optimist. And I I think I'm really not just optimistic about this, but really excited about what 2021 is going to mean for customer centricity, but also customer success, and the growth we're going to see in businesses where we just, like we said, a year and a half ago, no one anticipated this. It was just run of the mill, business as usual. Things have changed. And I think we're going to see a lot of good that's going to come out of this, that people are going to be interacting and working very differently in the future.
I think you're absolutely right about that. All good stuff.
Guys, that was it from us. I just realized that was our first podcast of the year, Jay. So we're happy to be back. We've got an exciting 2021 plan with some great guests coming up on other topics. As Jason said, please do take a look on kind of our website, take a look on the LinkedIn groups, do have a look at the other questions that we pose. If you've got any feedback, we'd love to know. As ever, what we always like to do is do a bold recap. So the bold question that we posed at the beginning was, what are 3 specific things that you can do to help your organization be more customer centric? So have a think, do let us know, share your feedback. We'd love to hear it. But a big thank you from me, Jason Noble, based over here in London.
And thank you from me, Jason Whitehead, based over here in Washington, D.C. Have a great day, everyone.
Take care.